doing. But we are joined now on the phone by Ryan Aber of the Oklahoman, and he covers the Oklahoma Sooners. Ryan, this has been maybe, I would guess, and if it's not, you can correct me, one of the most interesting off seasons you've ever had to cover in your time covering the Sooners, hasn't it?
Fair to say, given everything that's happened, since that Bedlam loss in late November. It's just been incredible how much, sort of a roller coaster ride everything's been over these last few months.
Now, a lot of these, segments we're doing focus on the transfer portal and, new coaches and rebuilds and everything. So how do you feel that Brent Venables has wrapped his arms around this? He's done really well in the transfer portal after they were gutted, losing their quarterback and a lot of other players. And he's done that in a relatively short amount of time. But how does it feel to be working together from the outside, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think he's done about as well as you could have hoped. To lose two quarterbacks the stature of Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams, and Spencer Rattler was probably going to be gone anyway, regardless of how things would have happened. And in all likelihood, Caleb Williams under the old format, there's a good chance that he transfers as well. So to go out and get a guy like Dylan Gabriel with the experience that he has, the knowledge of their offense, and then to add, much more recently, backups like David Smoak, the Pitt transfer, and then obviously General Booty, the JUCO kid who committed the other day. They've done about as well as they could have hoped, given where they were, in mid-December.
Ryan, how much of a difference do you expect from what Lincoln Riley did offensively to what Jeff Lebby's going to want to do?
Yeah, it's quite a bit different, and the tempo that Jeff Lebby likes to run is a whole lot faster than what we saw from Lincoln Riley, and I think that's going to be one of the most obvious differences. But there's a lot of structural differences in what they like to do offensively. Both systems obviously have been really, really productive in recent years at different schools, but it's certainly going to look quite a bit different. The way they use tight ends and H-backs is quite a bit different. So, it's definitely a new day offensively in Norman.
Yeah, the way they use tight ends and H-backs is a sixth offensive lineman that can run routes. That's what they do. It's wild. Just do me a favor. Count the pick plays that you'll see the tight ends run in that offense. It's marvelous. We know it, from seeing it here when Jeff Lebby and Art Briles and Kendall Briles were all here in Waco. Is Dylan? Dylan Gabriel comes with a lot of experience. Of course, he hurt his shoulder last year. Was losing Caleb Williams, was Dylan Gabriel maybe the best salve for that burn that they could have gotten?
Absolutely. To get somebody as productive as Gabriel has been during his UCF career, but also to have the built-in the built-in knowledge of Jeff Lebby's offense and be ready to go. I think it's hard to undersell that because not only do you get a quarterback who knows what's going on, but you get a guy at the most important position on the field and with the most, intrinsic leadership that can translate that to the rest of the offensive players. And I think that certainly helps them adjust a whole lot faster than they would have otherwise. So I think, absolutely, if you would have said, well, you can't have Caleb Williams or Spencer Rattler back, but here's who you can have that's realistic. I think Dylan Gabriel absolutely would have been at the top of that list.
So, Ryan, skill position-wise, obviously Kennedy Brooks is gone. Caleb Williams is gone. That's two of their big producers from last year. Marvin Mims is back, although he had a little bit of a disappointing year. How do you feel like the skill positions and what Dylan Gabriel is going to have to work with have filled out so far under Venables?
Yeah, I think certainly, Marvin Mims is the one that you circle as a guy who they've really got to depend on this year. They've got some other guys behind him and at other receiver spots that they feel good about. like Jaleel Farouk for one, a couple of the incoming freshmen, Nick Anderson, Jaden Gibson, that they feel really good about. But Marvin Mims has proven that he can be that type of number one receiver. Last year, his opportunities didn't come around as much as he would have liked. So, we'll see how he's used a little bit differently in this offense versus what Lincoln Riley did last year, especially when they moved him inside. But then also they've got guys like Theo Weiss who've shown the ability to be playmakers, but he's missed a lot of time for injuries and other reasons. Missed most of last season, almost virtually all of last season due to injuries. So they've got guys at that spot they feel comfortable with. The running back spot to me is one of the big question marks on this team. They've got the guys who have shown flashes in like Marcus Major and a couple of those other guys, Eric Gray, but who is going to step up and be that clear number one that they've had for a few years in Kennedy Brooks? And I know Kennedy Brooks got sort of was, I think, very underrated by a lot of college football, but his ability to go out and just consistently produce made this a much better football team the last few years, and they're definitely going to miss that.
Just based on last year's Texas game alone, I would think that Kennedy Brooks will never have to buy a beer in Norman again.
You would hope not. I think between Kennedy Brooks and Caleb Kelly, with the play that he made on special teams late in that game to get them the ball back, you would imagine that those two guys won't have a problem getting a free beverage down on Campus Corner anytime soon.
Ryan, defensively, obviously that's the forte of Brent Venables, and man, it seems like the opinions have been mixed depending on what year you're looking at, even what week and what year you're looking at when it comes to Oklahoma defensive coordinators and just their defensive attack. What's Venables said, and what's kind of the goals that he's put out there as far as defensively what they're going to want to do, and how does that change what they have been doing?
Yeah, I'll start off on the back part of that. How does it change what they have been doing? This is a little bit different scheme than what we saw out of Alex Grinch. It's something that's familiar with anybody who's watched Clemson over the last few years. They bring pressure in a lot different ways than Alex Grinch did, and a lot different places that they can bring it. Alex Grinch, his defense clearly made improvements over where the OU defense was when he came aboard, but you could tell there were certain spots where, that edge rusher spot was going to be one, but, outside of that and the defensive end spots, they weren't really just absolutely getting after quarterbacks from all over the field. That's something that Brent Venables and Ted Roof really like to do. So it'll be a different matchup there. Now, the main thing that Brent Venables is saying right now, and it applies to the whole program, but really applies to the defense in particular, especially given how many guys they lost, is they're trying to build a program, not a team. And, it's easy in the transfer portal to plug in some guys and, feel a little bit better about things. But they're also not just looking toward 2022. They're looking beyond that. Now, they did add some guys who are going to have some a pretty quick impact, or expected to have a pretty quick impact in Norman. But I think the overarching attention is to build this defense back to what it was, for a good chunk of the first time that Brent Venables is here, which is, one of the best around.
Have you seen Oklahoma already start to kind of prepare themselves for the SEC in terms of you need big line? I mean, everybody wants great linemen, right, on offense and defense, but there is a different style or different makeup of guys in the SEC. Do you see them kind of planting the seeds, knowing that that's right around the corner? Or is the focus just squarely on, hey, this is year one and this is where we're looking?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it that you're seeing some of the seeds planted for that. And it does start at recruiting when you see, especially the defensive linemen, the differences in the guys that they're not only going after, but actually are taking serious looks at Oklahoma, which that was as big a problem as any. It wasn't necessarily who they were going after, they were able to get and bring in. And I think that dynamic is starting to shift a little bit, especially as you get into players who, if they stay 3 years, are going to play in the SEC at some point. But the other thing is just the structural makeup of the program and the department. You've seen that start to shift as Brent Venables has brought in just a ton of other staffers. He's got a five-man full mission team that's devoted to off the field work with players. But beyond that, even communications and graphic design guys, just on-field support staff guys. They've added just a ton of manpower over the last few months. And yes, part of that is just the fact that they're transitioning from, Lincoln Riley to Brent Venables and changing the program into his vision. But a big part of it is looking forward to that move to the SEC and not trying to, enter in such a deficit as they would if they were structurally built the same as they were, when Lincoln Riley left.
Are those things, of course, some of that's modern stuff, but is that some of the differences you've seen that maybe you picked up from Dabo Swinney and working at Clemson for all the time he was there?
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it that a lot of the things, especially that sole mission that I talked about, the off-the-field stuff where they're doing some community service, for instance, this weekend down in Miami. They're doing some other like internship and resume building stuff, and just a wide variety of stuff. That's stuff that directly comes from Dabo Swinney and what he did, what he's implemented out there at Clemson. And I think it falls, in a big part falls in line with what Brent Venables has thought about his job all along, going back to his days at Kansas State. I actually wrote about this a couple weeks ago, and always wanted to do things like this, but never really saw it implemented until he went out to Clemson for his interview. And that's what he fell in love with, why he decided to initially join Dabo Swinney out there. And it's a big part of what he's brought from Clemson back to Norman that's different from when he left to go out there a decade ago.
Ryan, I know there's nothing's ever really unanimous, but in terms of that move to the SEC here in the next 2-3 years, is it pretty overwhelmingly in favor of the move? Are people mostly excited, or is there any hesitancy at all on the part of fans knowing they're like, hey, we might not be winning the conference every year or every other year the way that we got accustomed to in the Big 12. Are Oklahoma fans kind of prepared for more money, better opponents, fun schedule and all that, but that might come at a price?
Yeah, I think they understand what's going on. That it does mean more money, and it might mean a few more losses along the way. But the thought process, I think, for most of the OU fans that I've talked to is yes, all that stuff might be true when you look at the negatives of it, but it puts them in position to be in better position to win national championships, and that's something that it's crazy to think of that this national championship drought. It's hard to say that, but they've gone 21 seasons, 22 seasons without one at this point. It's the longest they've had since they won their first one in the mid-50s. So there are people that are really anxious to get that behind them, and I think they feel like, for the most part, that this move will put them in better position to win championships. They just might have to go through some growing pains, and also, have to deal with the competition that'll lead to not quite as many wins in the regular season here moving forward in all likelihood.
Man, when you hear that drought and you just think of all the opportunities they've had, right, to break that streak, I mean, golly, so many appearances with a chance to change that and just have come up short every time. But yeah, it's amazing to think that's already been 21 years. But they've had 5 opportunities in that time period and just fell short.
Yeah, they've been there, really as much as anybody else, outside of probably Alabama and Clemson and maybe Ohio State over the last few years. They just haven't been able to break through and get another one. But the consistency of this program, I think, is what really stands out when you look nationally. But like I said, they're ready to break through and get that championship. And to do that, I think this move to the SEC will put them in better position for that, to reach that goal.
So, Ryan, I'd imagine we'll probably talk to you, sometime again in the midsummer. You check it, Big 12 Media Days, kind of that time frame as the season crawls around the corner. But between now and the start of fall, when things really get, going, what must Brent Venables and Oklahoma do or address, in your opinion, to be ready to go win another Big 12 championship?
Yeah, I think the biggest things, one is recruiting and keep up with that. This recruiting has been much different under Brent Venables than it was Lincoln Riley for some of the reasons that we've already talked about, and also just the approach that Brent Venables takes as far as limiting the number of offers. And then when you look at the roster as it's currently built up, they've addressed their biggest need, which was quarterback depth over the last few weeks. But I think the biggest thing this offseason is just getting prepared for what Jeff Lebby's offense requires of you. When I talked about, the offensive line, being able to move up and down the field, to keep that tempo, the receivers, all of it, those guys have to be physically ready to go. And, I know Jerry Schmidt is, preaching that quite a bit here, or will be here once the summer program kicks up. But to me, those are, a couple of the things that they've really got to focus on between now and the start of a preseason camp here in just a couple months.
Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the summer. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me as always.
Yeah. Ryan Aber, the Oklahoman, joins us here on Sick 'em 365 Radio and 365 Sports. And I asked him, Craig, when you were sitting down, is this the most interesting offseason that he's ever covered?
Yeah,
by far.
Yeah, it's not even close. Really, I've followed Oklahoma pretty much my whole life. And, in the early 2000s, it was recruiting battles with Texas and, just battles with them on the field. And, they had transitioned this great run where Texas was down and they're winning the Big 12 every year, but getting to, a championship opportunity and falling short and winning Heisman's, but again, not winning that big crystal ball, or what formerly was a crystal ball. I like that way better than the playoff trophy, by the way. The crystal ball was way, way better than the big golden lipstick. But, they've had massive, massive amounts of success. The only thing with Oklahoma is that it is ultimately about national titles, and they've been sitting there at 7 for a really long time now. Like he said, it's been 21 years, and they've had their opportunities to make that 8, 9. Shoot, they could have 10 or 11 if they would have, won those games that they were in. But it just shows you how hard it is to win a national title, and they seem geared up and ready to go. But yeah, I do think there's going to be some questions. There is a difference in what they're going to be doing now versus what they have been doing. How long does it take them to grasp that? The good news is offensively, it doesn't take long to learn that offense. It doesn't take, and you don't even have to be all that smart to learn that offense, quite frankly. You don't have to be some master's student to figure it out. It's very, very simple. So that part should be easy. Now, as far as having the actual bodies to execute it and do all that, that probably is going to take some more recruiting and some more time to find the speedsters and the weapons that you need. But, in terms of just adapting it, it's about as simple as it gets, even though it's as lethal as it gets at times. So I don't see any issue there. And then with Venables being a defensive guy, they've been so topsy-turvy there. There's moments where you're like, man, they've got it figured out on defense. And then a couple weeks later, you're like, well, maybe not. Maybe this is more of like what we got frustrated with others. But, with Venables in charge and Lebby on offense, I think they're going to be pretty good. I don't know that I'm as fully confident in them just, hey, put them at number 1 in the Big 12 like you could do for about 10 years in a row, quite frankly. I don't know if I'm at that point anymore, but I do think they'll be right squarely in the mix. And if they were playing in that championship game at the end of the year, I don't think that would come as a surprise to anybody. But I do think for the first time in a long time, they do have major question marks. Like Dylan